Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're here with another Jazz Matters podcast. Today's guest, of course, is the great Mr. Victor Bowen. And Victor is,
Okay, I'll take that.
okay, yeah, you got a lot to work with now. We also have,
Yeah.
of course, Vaughn Coulter here with us from Jazz Beats Radio. And we want everyone, before we get started, to go ahead and click on Yes Jazz Matters. That'll be the website for Jazz Matters, who is a nonprofit, or what is a nonprofit organization, 501c3, and we do take donations. You can hit on the donation page. Also, the Jazz Matters store. You can go there and buy shirts, a lot like this, and yeah, there you go. And
I see that.
a lot of other apparel that you can get a hold of. All of it is right on the Jazz Matters store. And for all you hot sauce lovers, we even got Jazz Matters hot sauce. So there we are. And like I said, we want you to like us, subscribe to us, and we're going to go ahead and get this thing started. We got here Mr. Victor Bowen, and Victor spent a lot of time, a lot of years in Detroit, and he's going to today pretty much enlighten us on a lot of the behind-the-scene things that was happening during the Motown era, and also other music adventures and stuff that he was a part of around the city of Detroit. So Vic, for all the people that don't know you, let them know who you are and let them know how you got in this business.
Okay. Um, I started actually playing seriously when I was 13, but I actually had an ability with music early on, like maybe 4 or 5 years old. But in I wound up in Detroit in 1964, moving from East Point, Georgia, which was a shock in itself. And when I got there, Motown was blowing up just when my feet hit the pavement, right? So here I am coming from Georgia and I'm stepping into Motown and I didn't even know what that meant, but I was there. So elementary school, fast forward to middle school, in my neighborhood, there was a band like 2 blocks over from where I lived. And me and a bunch of the kids in my age group, I was about 13 at the time, and we started forming this little band. And I started out with a snare drum. No drum set, a snare drum. And I met the Womats. And if you seen the movie about, I think they call it Standing in the Shadows, the movie about the Funk Brothers.
The Funk Brothers, yeah, exactly.
At that time, Ray Parker wasn't quite playing with Stevie Wonder back in the day. And this was all pre-Wonder Wonder Love and all this other stuff, right? So I started playing then, and then by the time I graduated high school, I had a 10-piece band. And I was 17 years old. And of course, all the kids in the city at the time wanted to, when we got grown, we was gonna get them Motown jobs, So the other thing is, when we graduated high school, Motown moved to California. Hence, how I backed into the people behind the scenes of Motown, because when they left a lot of the local musicians who built Motown. If you've seen that movie, Berry Gordy always said the reason why he got jazz musicians because they were more accomplished and they were better suited at dealing with some new music, because jazz is constantly new anyway. So that just fit right in with what they did. That was their day job. And then they were working the jazz clubs at night. So needless to say, how I backed into this, I was 16 years old in my sophomore or junior year in high school. I can't remember exactly which one it was, somewhere in that point. And I had just gotten into marching band. And one of the guys that when I got in there with him the year before, and he had met Marcus Belgrave. I didn't know who Marcus Belgrave was. I didn't know him from China, you know what I'm saying? So he came back to school after a summer break, and he was sitting second chair when he left. When he came back, he took the first chair slot from a senior. And that turned everybody's head, and everybody's like, where you been this summer? What you been doing? So there was a place called Metro Arts Complex. It was founded by a woman who had a dance troupe. And when Motown left the city, all of those musicians that was working at Motown that didn't go, they got involved in an after-school music program. And that's where my whole life changed. I met people like Marcus Belgraves, Sam Saunders, Harold McKinney, Jimmy Allen, Roy Brooks. All of these guys were jazz musicians, adult jazz musicians. I'm a teenager, right? So I'm in the rehearsal studio one day just playing by myself, you know, because I'm the new kid in the neighborhood, so I don't know what's going on, but they had rehearsal books, so I'm in there jamming by myself. And Harold McKinney, the McKinney family is a well-known Detroit musical family. And there's a whole family of them now. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard of Galen McKinney, who played with the group Jazz, all-female group with Regina Carter and was it Marion Hayden, Regina Carter, and Galen McKinney. And they were here in Atlanta a while back, but Galen McKinney is Harold McKinney's daughter. And Harold heard me playing one day, and he came into the booth and he introduced himself. So about 6 months to a year later, I'm in the same booth practicing. And at that time, James Jamerson was in and out of Detroit because he would always come back to Detroit, because when he went to California with Marvin and them, he didn't really fit in out there. He was used to playing with the cats in Detroit. And if you know anything about Detroit music, it's on par with New York or any of the other major jazz places, right? So I met these people and they started teaching us all this stuff. And the only thing they asked is that we pass it along, because they knew they were going to get older and they wanted us to teach the next group of musicians behind us what they gave to us. That's the only prerequisite. And while I was doing all of this, by the time I was 19, I had a 10-piece band. And I was trying to get work. They had junior fraternities in the city of Detroit at that time. You had junior alphas, junior AKs, all of that kind of stuff. And they threw parties on the weekend. So there was a whole circuit of gigs out there for teenagers. If you were a musician, you could get to work. So I spent my whole high school years trying to crack that circuit, but never could get in because there was always a problem with the local number 6, the musicians union, the union reps and the booking agents. And I never could break it. By the time I turned 19, I had at the 10-piece band, and we were developing our business skills, because I was the youngest union rep at the time. And I took that position because I wanted to play so bad. And the only way I was going to get a gig is I had to have a union contract. So when I went and talked to the people who were throwing the gigs, they would have no choice but to deal with me, right? Because I had the power of the union behind. And that's how we broke down the circuit. And by the time I got that done, the last gig we did before I came out of that and went on to other things, there was a gig at the Community Arts Center at the Michigan State Fairground. The building held 6,000 people. And on that show, Eddie Kendricks had just released Boogie Down. I'm sure y'all remember that song, right? And he opened up that show and my band headlined it. And the thing I remember most about that gig is the night that after the show, to get paid, I went back there, man. Those kids made $13,000 in one night in 1973. Now think about that. 1973, they made $13,000 off a sock hop at $250 a head. That's what it was like in Detroit. Because what music did for me, 2 things. It taught me how to be a small business owner, because I was band leader So I booked the gigs, collected the money, and paid my employees. I had no idea that it would eventually show up on the back end because I've owned my own small business for the last 25 years. But that's just some of the stuff that was a byproduct of that experience. But I don't know how I'm gonna tell this story in detail in an hour because there's way too much stuff in my musical career and all the people that I know. But how I found out about this thing, Ray McMurtry, Edwin, you know him.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you know him or not. But me and Ray was playing in the same group of kids when we were kids. And I didn't meet Ray until about 14 years ago here, right? We had seen each other, but we never played with each other until we got here. And I met Ray about 14 years ago, and that's how I wound up in this situation. But Detroit was, if I had this to do all over again, you know, you hear places like New York and all the other hotbeds of musicians, I would have went right back there and did exactly what I did. Even though, you know, I'm not well known to the world, but it was such a great musical experience. And it allowed me to develop myself as a musician as opposed to be trying to copy other musicians who already had their niche in the industry, you know what I'm saying? Because one of the things they taught was, listen, you might as well give up trying to be John Coltrane and all these other people. There's already one of those. And if you want to have a long career in this music, it's better to deal with what you have. Because that's the only chance you'll ever make a name for yourself, by being you. And for me, I had lots of opportunities along the way. When I was, my first son was born, I was one of the, before Prince ever made it to everybody know who Prince, because of my experience in the union, they started something called the National Musicians Referral Hotline back then. And when my first son was born, I get this call from Minneapolis. And it says, listen, we heard a lot about you. And at first I thought it was a crank call, right? Because back, you know, you didn't have cell phones, landline. I was like, are you kidding? No, man, we heard about you from local number 6. I said, really? Are you serious? Then they said, well, you know, in Minneapolis right now, you know, this is about to blow up. And I heard him talk about this guy named Prince, but I didn't know who was. What's a Prince to me? I'm in Detroit. Don't nobody know who Prince is. And because I just got married and my oldest son was born, I decided, nah, I'm gonna stay here and at least make sure my son knows my name before I get out on the road and be a gypsy, if you know what I'm saying, you know? So, of course, that didn't work out either, but those are the kind of things that I was exposed to just because I met those people and learned enough about the music business to where I'm still playing this day, 50 years later. And I would like to tell this story and try to present it the way it happened when I was a kid, but that's a whole nother story. But it would be a great story. It would be a great story if I could recreate exactly what was going on, because it was so many bands. I mean, you had people like Greg Fillingham walk around the street as a kid when I was a kid, right? Ray Parker was a little older than me. The Clue Brothers, Vaughn and Earl, both of them were there, right? All of these people, plus you had Marcus Belgrave, Harold McKinney, Sam Saunders, and a host of the older guys that knew all of these other guys. I remember we were down at Metro Arts Complex. The first time I ever met Freddie Hubbard in person, he was a good friend of Marcus Belgrave. So we all sitting in the bandstand, you know, rehearsing the big band. And Marcus, he had this right, I got one of my friends here I want y'all to meet. You know, trumpet players with the raspy. We all gonna like, who is this gonna be? And then all of a sudden, Freddie Hubbard steps out there and everybody in the trumpet section, everybody in the room went, wow, you know? So as usual, you know, kids are always gonna try to test the jazz musicians. So somebody said, would y'all play Flight of the Bumblebee? And Marcus and Freddie looked at each other, man, and they tore Flight of the Bumblebee apart. All our ears just blew off our head like, wow, these guys can play Flight of the Bumblebee, and plus they can play all this jazz. And see, that was the marriage between jazz and classical. I mean, Wynton was the later manifestation of that, right?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
Marcus Snoop went and put it to you like this. In that early band with Ray Charles, when Clark Terry, and there was another trumpet player sitting in that trumpet section, that other trumpet player was Marcus Belgrade. That's who I was hanging around with when I was 16 years old. Now, how lucky could you be, right? To meet these people who actually knew all of these people. And how I got invested, my mother, me and my friends, you know, we formed these bands, and we were not your average kids, man. We were working gigs when we was 13 or 14 years old, playing Snake Bone by Lou Donaldson, you know, So What, Lee Morgan, you know what I'm saying? I mean, So What, Miles Davis, and then what was the tune that we were playing back then? Because Lee Morgan was doing a lot of work with Horace Silver, Art Blake, you know, them kind of
The
people.
jazz messengers,
Yeah,
and all
right.
them. Yeah.
So here we are, we 13, 14 years old. We playing this stuff, man. When you had James Brown, Sly and the Family Stone, all of this stuff is going on, and we playing jazz plus all of the other stuff. So it was a real special time to be involved in music because it was wide open, man. It was just wide open. We played rock and roll, R&B, you name it, we played it. And the musical experience in itself, man, words really don't justify what we were exposed to. And I tell folks all the time, I say, you know, music took me places where I never would have been without music. Mm-hmm. And right now I'm trying to tell this story and bring it together for the Detroit public school system. Because at the time, the Detroit public school system could compete anywhere in the country. The city is nothing like it was when I was there as a kid. And for me personally, if I had to, if when I die, God says, well, would you like to do that over again? I said, yeah, let's do it one more. You know, let's do that one more time, you know. And it's so much stuff, man. I can remember Anita Baker, story about Anita Baker. Anita Baker used to sing with this group called Chapter 8, right? And at this time, I had a band called Mass Transit. Chapter 8 was doing their own thing, but there was a group called Sea Wind back in the day. I don't know where you're familiar with this.
Oh my gosh. Jerry Hay and
so now you know who I'm talking about. Okay.
I know who you're talking about. Absolutely.
So we were playing Sea Wind stuff, right? So they were working this club downtown called Studio 54. And the band I was in that time was one of the better bands I'd ever been in. As a matter of fact, it probably was one of the best all-around bands I'd ever played in because it was stacked with a bunch of the young lions of the time, you know. And they built the Renaissance Center. I'm jumping around here. They built the Renaissance Center downtown. You know, that big GM project on East Jefferson down there with all them towers, they call it the Ren-Cen. We would have been the first band that ever played in that building if we hadn't broke up like 2 weeks before. That's another story altogether. But in that time frame, they agreed to let us come in and set in one night. We weren't trying to take the gig. We was just trying to get a slot, you know. So we get down there and we start playing the Sea Wind. And the owner heard us playing. And he actually let them go and took us into the club after that. We weren't trying to cut them, you know, because everybody knew everybody. We all grew up together, so it wasn't no big deal. But that's just one of the things that happened. And, you know, being a band leader, being a musician, you know, I studied music at the college level. So I'm a musician who my instrument happens to be drums. But I've done, from my musical skills, I ran I was a lead tech at my church for 17 years, and I've mixed people like John P. I mixed John P. Key twice. I've done the Wardlow Brothers, Shirley Caesar, just a host of gospel artists. So from that musical experience, I was able to do all of this other stuff. And right now, I'm working on a project trying to hook Detroit up with Atlanta through this project Jam Kazam, and I'm still working on that. But you know, that's basically where I'm at, man. And like I said, I would really like to do more interviews with you guys so I could really get into the nuts and bolts of the time frames, because you know, I was studying music in the music department in high school, and I also once I graduated, I went on to college and studied music at the college level and took music theory and learned how to read orchestral the conductor's sheet music. You know, the conductor has the great staff with everybody's part on it. So that was one of the things that I really got out of college. As far as playing jazz was concerned, it wasn't much there. But what I did learn about form and function, it allowed me to play a lot more music than I ever would ever be able to play, because once you understand form and function, about 99% of all the music is just a standard bar form, which is known as ABA. And all the other creative stuff is like probably less than 1%, because we talking about the real exact stuff. But most common music is gonna be in a standard bar form. And those type of skills now, a guy could call me for a gig today and tell me the tunes. Gig time, we don't even have to rehearse them. I just show up knowing the tunes, and we've all played them, so we just jump up on stage and go for it, man. And that's what happens when you spend your life playing music your whole life.
Yeah, exactly. Because I do pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to find out from you, like right now, what you're hearing now over the radio or over wherever you're listening from platform. What do you think that this particular trend of music is going? And I'm basically specifically checking with you on the smooth jazz and as well as the mainstream radio programming and so forth. Where do you think this music? Do you think that it'll ever be a time for the structure of music as what we grew up in? The same thing you were just talking about. Nowadays, the music is more of a vamp. It doesn't have the different movements that we were accustomed to when we were coming up. So do you think that it's that's going to show up in the very near future? Because me and Vaughn were talking about something. Vaughn, tell them what you were talking about the music itself and who you were talking to about.
There's a gentleman that lives here in Atlanta, and he's, I originally, before I made my step back into the broadcasting business and being able to be on the radio and play this great stuff, America's original art form, and have a joy of playing it for the audience that we play it for on the radio. This gentleman I met back in the day when I was doing a lot of theater, and it's funny, he goes by the name of the jazz evangelist, and he spent a lot of time in the music, and his name is Scott Fugate. And Scott used to run a radio station up in Gainesville, Georgia, at the small, I think it was a women's college called Bruneau College in Gainesville, and he's very knowledgeable about the music and the history of it, and he's followed the trend for at least the last 45 years, I believe, and he's well versed at where he thinks where the music is headed, and he said it stands to reason that the current sound that's coming out of the market, the jazz market, is probably going to be around for the next 30, 35 years. He said no longer will you hear music unless it's some station that decides to continue on with playing the classics, but there'll never be another Herbie Hancock, Miles Davis, Lee Morgan. Um, those cats, you know, the only thing we've got left of them are what their recordings are. Um, and because nobody, he really considers the fact that nobody's willing to actually sit down and listen to a guy play a 5 minute solo anymore. That's not going to happen. And the recording industry is going to do the same thing. It's going to limit that. The only thing they're concentrating on is playing a melody and a few licks in there, and the song is done. So, you know, he's very, like I said, I admire Scott. He's one of those guys that I can always chime in about, you know, the future of music and what he perceives it's going to look like down the road. But the way Edwin was expressing it to you, where do you see it going? Do you think that that's the right track? Is it headed down that road where we're pretty much going to be, you know, left with what this thing is called smooth jazz for the next 30, 35 years?
Well, from my perspective, and I'm sort of a backdoor music historian, right? I remember when the rap guys started doing their thing, right? And I'd be sitting around listening to with my kids, right? And I said, that piece there comes from so and so and so. Go listen to the record. No, it didn't, Dad. Come back. They did take that from them, Dad. So I'm just letting you know how this works. Okay?
Right.
There's nothing new under the sun with music. Okay?
Yeah.
It's only 12 notes. Yeah. Those 12 notes have been around for eons. Now, the only inflection point that we have is that we have electronic sounds now. But my personal opinion, and I could be wrong, there are some kids right now learning all of that stuff you're talking about, listening to Miles, listening to Bird. I seen a young kid on Facebook the other day done played note for note Charlie Parker solo. So now what does that tell you? They have nowhere else to go.
I agree. They have nowhere else to go.
They have nowhere else to go. Because the house has to have a foundation. Now you can modernize it, but you still got to pour the concrete, right? So if music is going to remain a human flesh endeavor, because we're going to need that. The problem is we have allowed computers to dictate our humanity. Only thing that will stop us from having another Lee Morgan, Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane is that they figure a computer to do that, and that's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Because the computer is just an extension of man's own imagination. That's all it is. It can never be more than that. Artificial intelligence, we have that now. It's called algorithms.
Yeah.
It's not thinking, it's just processing numbers. It's not human. So music is the truest expression of human emotion. And as long as we feel, there's always going to be the possibility we'll get another Miles, we'll get another Dizzy. Because without that, humanity will die. That's my own opinion.
Right. Now that's you're saying the same thing that me and Vaughn has had this conversation before. Ever so many decades, there are going to be a lot of musicians, like you say, you saw the young kids doing Charlie Parker stuff note for note. That's going to happen. It has always happened. What we really need at this point is a new innovator. The innovation has not changed since Charlie Parker and Coltrane and Miles. So when there's someone comes up, a whole different innovator, that actually takes the music into a whole different direction. In other words, that's where you get your evolution. Because
Oh,
when kids grasp that stuff at a very early age, those kids are like sponges anyway. Uh,
yeah.
they're gonna grasp what is already there. Now, depending on what they decide to do with it once they get older, you know what I'm saying? Are they gonna know to take it to another level? Or are they going to look at that and say, okay, I can get through this because this is some difficult stuff and it took a lot of people a long time to get to this level. I'm comfortable here. Problem is, right now, there is another form of music that is not as deep or is not as innovative at that stuff. And that's what's making a lot of people a lot of money right now. That's very super simple stuff. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to be a music student. Rappers are not music students in college and stuff
No.
like that. You know, they picked up a machine and find out that they can hit a button, and next thing you know, they're on chart. Now they're millionaires. Okay, then you see what I'm saying? It pushes that evolution of the live musician back, you know, where it really should continuously evolve. It should move forward, you know. But until society accepts it again, it's going to pretty much, like you said, be with us. And I'm talking about the current trend of jazz. It's going to be with us for about at least the next 20 or 30 years. Right?
Well, yep. But that's because smooth jazz is just an extension of R&B, though.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, that's all it is. Exactly.
I mean, look,
that's all it is.
And what I'm about to say is that I'm a jazz historian, okay? I went all the way back in my studies when I was growing up. I'm a young man doing all of this stuff. And then we talk about Miles, but let's pick Miles, who spanned the music from the what? Early 50s all the way up till he died, right?
Really, it was the 40s, right? Because he was like playing with Parker for
Younger
a while,
people.
wasn't he?
Younger people. He went from playing with all the old guys, and then he kept a constant flow of younger people. Art Blakey did the same thing.
Same thing. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And because of that, all of the stuff that is trending now, the only thing that changes when you got the rap boys with the computers and they sync tracks, and that's why the music has no soul, because it's all looped in. It has no musical fundamentals involved. It's all technology involved. And one thing we can count on about human beings, we are social and emotional creatures. And as long as we are spiritual and social and emotional creatures, we will always have that place for something, the next wave. What you're seeing now is the commercialization of the art form. But it's not what it was when you, me, and Edwin was growing up. But you have people like Winton, who's at the Lincoln Center. You know, he's still doing it. When my daughter was in high school, I was in an after-school music program. It was called Stillwater's Youth Sinfonia. I enrolled my daughter into that. I walked in there. There was a bunch of families in there, but they had no concept of what music was really all about, right? And they looked at me, who is this guy? So I walked in and said, well, what are y'all gonna do with these kids? All y'all doing is just teaching them some songs. Y'all ain't teaching them nothing about music. How about we design a music theory class for them? By the time I left there, I took a 10-piece chamber orchestra. We had, at its peak, we had 90 students, full orchestra. Took them to New York, took them to LA. Went out there to LA, and of course, you know, anybody from the South, you know, they think everybody in Georgia is just country bumpkin and we don't know nothing, right? So
exactly. Oh yeah.
I get out there and I'm looking around because you know anything about NAM, the National Organization of Negro Musicians? That one of the oldest classical, black classical musicians organization who does William Grant Still and all. See, you know, I know what I'm talking about. William Grant Still was is high on that list. And one of the first people that I was telling you about, Harold McKinney, who was my mentor, he wrote 19 classical compositions, right? He told me this. And when I took those kids to NAM, I looked at the cover of the program and there was Harold's face. And then it clicked on me. I said, that's right. Harold told me he had wrote 19 classical pieces. You see what I'm saying? And I'm going like, wow. You know what I'm saying? This guy, the same guy who saw my talent. And when I moved from Detroit and moved down here and started over, my brother lived down the block from him. And me and my brother could almost pass for twins. Every time he saw my brother, my brother would tell me, he'd come up to me, hey, Vic, you still playing them drums? He'd say, no. Yeah, he's still playing the drum, but I'm not Victor, okay? And, you know, and it really didn't dawn on me why, when I was a kid, that he had that interest. Because see, their business was, okay, they had a bunch of kids around them, right? But they were going through and seeing who really had the skill. I was so dumb and naive, man. I thought I couldn't play worth a lick, but all the time, they sizing me up, pulling me off to the side. Because, you know, when everybody's competing, you know, music is very competitive and it can be cruel. You know what I'm saying? You get on stage and thinking you can play, right? And somebody call that tune that you don't know, boy, they will abuse you fast. You know what I'm saying? And I learned that before I ever did a jam session. There was a place in Detroit, Ernie Rogers, great saxophone player, arrangers in the city of Detroit. His family had this place called the Rapper House. The Rapper House was when Marcus and them cats go play their regular paying gigs. Then when they get off work, they go in there and then they might be in a quartet and be playing all night. You know what I'm saying? Because on that gig, they had to play what the gig called for. When they went to jam, they played and see, that's where most of that creative stuff came out of. As a matter of fact, I was told by some inside sources said before John Coltrane ever recorded Giant Steps, he had rehearsed that tune for over 10,000 hours before he recorded.
Wow.
Now, you can't get that kind of information from somebody who didn't know Train. You know what I'm saying? And I know y'all both saw that in The Pursuit of Perfection, that documentary they did on Coltrane.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
The Pursuit of Train,
Yeah. And I came up with that same notion. It wasn't about the money. It was about how good could I be? You see, that's the freedom. Music will allow you to push yourself to your maximum extension. But you got to get away from the money first, because first of all, you have to master your instrument in order to play jazz. That's why everybody's taking the shortcuts. They don't want to work that hard no more, man. But if you look at the history of music, all breakthroughs come out of that. All of them. Every great musician that we've ever had that type of mentality. The money was fine, but it was more about the music. That's what drove Charlie Parker.
Right now, you know,
that's what's going to drive the next young kid. And as long as that desire to be excellent is out here, there's going to be a kid that's going to pick it up. So it don't look that way now, but from all of my years of playing, and what really messes the young kids up, you know, they try to get by me with what they be talking about, right? And then I can tell them what they're talking about and then tell them where it came from. And then it blows their mind when I say, that's where that comes from. Oh, it didn't come from there? Yes, it did. Go listen to that music. See, because they only know 10-year cycles. You know, the average kid out here can't get past 10 years. And once they discover it, and I will say this, now some folk gonna hate me for this. I tell you who are really picking up on this stuff is white kids. Because they see the value in playing instruments. And all our kids are seeing now is rappers who have no instruments. So everybody's taking the easy way out to make $1 million because that's all that is.
Right.
Playing an instrument is way too hard.
But Vic, one of the reasons why is simply because, like going back to when we were in school, that opportunity was presented to you through public school. No?
Absolutely. And that's another subject. That's another subject.
Your exposure to an instrument was something that we definitely, it was put on us whether we wanted to do it or not. Now, whether we accept it or not, that's another thing. But the thing is, all those that I know that went through public school and were exposed to instruments have a better appreciation for live music. Whereas like now, it's not there. You don't have the exposure. That's why it's taking so long to get.
And when they, right, and when they took the music departments out of public school, but see the problem with that was that's why we are now not in the position that we were, because music, kids who study music scored 10 points higher than the other students.
Exactly.
That was proven when we were in school.
That's right.
And the reason why they stopped that was the fact that the record companies got tired of dealing with creative Black people, and they wanted to take control of the medium.
Well, one of the other reasons was
wow,
that was a way out for a lot of underserved Black kids that came out of a lot of
absolutely, and it played
absolutely, yeah.
Way out. That was a college scholarship right there. You know what I'm saying?
And wait a minute.
Oh, you're preaching now.
Yeah. Now we get to the crux of it, because
yeah,
you know, you go back to the Brown versus the Board of Education decision. What that said was,
right.
It's all right to have segregated schools, but you can't have segregated texts.
Right.
We got to have the same text as the white kids to compete. And for years we did that. Then in 1965, when we got the voting rights and all of that other stuff, by the time we got out of high school, we had more Black males in college than we did in jail. So look, if you take it through the frame of the politics of it, because one thing that white people had a problem with, their kids were modeling people like Little Richard. You understand what I'm saying? They were modeling people like John Coltrane. They couldn't have that, man.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Now one more thing before we go, because we got to go. Is there any way that if people want to contact you or get in touch with you, is there any way they could do that? Do you have a web platform or what?
So I have a YouTube channel.
Okay,
and it's you just punch my name in on YouTube, and it's not finished yet, but this project that I'm working on is what I call I'm designing a project where a young professional musician won't be trapped into just playing one type of gig, and he can set up his studio in the basement where he can challenge himself to play all the live music that he needs to play, and being able to get into somebody might call you for a gig on a Monday, you got 10 tunes to learn by Friday, training yourself how to, once you listen to enough music, you can, as a drummer, okay, I'm gonna do a phrase, right? And drummers have to flip the phrase when you go to the next part of the song, right? So the release of relaxation and tension in the chordal structure of a tune will give you all of the necessary stuff in your ears to automatically respond to that. And I played enough music, and I'm gonna talk about being the professional musician who don't limit himself to what type of gig he playing, being able to play jazz, rock and roll, whatever it needs to be played live. See, and they're talking about putting music education in the new package they just did. You wanna know why they're doing that? Because there was a reason for humanities. When you had humanities, human beings learned how to respect things other than themselves. So if you look at education as a whole, the Romans, the Greeks knew this. They took gladiators and taught them how to sing and dance and all that stuff, made them better gladiators, okay? Even they knew that. But in America, it got to the point where you know, the music gave us way too much power. I guess to just put it on the table, because we became the quintessential face of America. From Louis Armstrong to now, everybody loves American culture. And American culture came out of the bowels of slave ships.
But what we're gonna do is because we gotta wrap it up right now.
Like I said, we can talk about this all day.
Yeah, I know you can.
You know what? I'm like, you are, let me tell you something. Brother, you dropping some gems right now. That's all I got to say. You are dropping some gems today. Oh my gosh.
Well, you know, I've been scared to.
But you know what? I'm telling you right now, you are speaking the truth, you know, and it's just, like I tell Edwin, and the beauty of this, of what Edwin does with Yes Jazz Matters and all the musicians and all of the experts of this great art form, when you all speak, oh my gosh, there's so much wealth. I mean, you can't buy this. I mean, you can't put a price on this. You just can't. And I'm just sitting here, and you know, if I never picked up a trombone, if I was never asked in public schools, was interested in playing music, and later on transferred the recorder to the trombone, I wouldn't be sitting here in this chair right now.
Absolutely.
To you.
Absolutely.
You know, because it changed my whole projection. I mean, my path had altered it totally, you know. And so it's always been in me, and I'm here to preserve it, and I'm an advocate for bringing it back into its rightful place where it belongs.
Absolutely.
You know, and just running into, you know, it's like Edwin is just like the best mentor I have at this age I could ever have. You know, it's just the beauty of this knowledge that I've obtained and where it's taken me right now. My passion is so high, you know. And so, you know, when I get around cats like yourself, Mr. Bowen and Edwin and Joe Jennings and all of these great legendary voices in this
some of the
music,
neighborhood folk.
you know, it's breathtaking. Absolutely, yeah, man.
Well, Joe Jennings is the South equivalent of a Marcus Belgrade.
Joe's
Gotcha.
on another level. Period. Now,
well, you know, I played with a lot of his students in this town.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I played with him a long time. But go ahead and let them know where they can get you.
Well, you know, you can go to my YouTube channel, but it's not much on there. But I got a Gmail account. It's vicbowendrum@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. Go ahead and get it, Vaughn. Let them know where you are.
Yeah, I'm at jazzbeatsradio.com. You can also find me at my Instagram page, which is Vaughn Coulter. And also, I have a YouTube page. It's called Soulscapes on Jazz Beats Radio. And that's the name of my show for Jazz Beats Radio. It's called Soulscapes. And
okay.
I live by that. I live by that motto. Jazz ain't nothing but soul.
That's all it is. That's all it is. It's a spiritual connection.
Okay, and you can get me at yesjazzmatters.org, and you can go and check out what we are doing over at Jazz Matters. Like I said, once you go over there, definitely go to the donate page and so forth, and go and check us out, and you'll see what we got coming up. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks a lot, Vic, and we'll get back at this. There will be a second chapter.
Thank you, my brother, because I know I wasn't going to be able to do it now.
I know. All right, man. Peace out. Take it easy.
All right. Hey, gentlemen. Nice to meet you guys. All of us are cut of the same cloth. And I like to close and say this. I know in my bones, as long as I'm still playing jazz, there's going to be some kid out there that's going to do exactly what I've done.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Okay.
All right, brothers. Be blessed.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Sir.